There are moments in life when a simple gesture of disrespect ignites something far greater than anyone expects. And this story begins with exactly that. Imagine a tired biker walking into a small-town restaurant after riding for more than 12 hours straight, covered in dust, grease, and the silent weight of the road. He wasn't looking for praise, nor attention, only a warm meal and a moment of rest. But before he could even take a seat, a young waiter burst into laughter, loud enough for the entire room to turn and stare, mocking the biker's clothes as if he were nothing more than a joke. In that instant, the atmosphere shifted, and what should have been an ordinary morning became the spark of something unforgettable. What no one in that restaurant knew was that this biker belonged to a brotherhood bound not by ink or leather, but by loyalty, respect, and a shared understanding of the hardships of the road. He simply lowered his head, swallowed the humiliation, and left quietly, not because he was weak, but because he understood that sometimes the strongest people are the ones who choose not to fight back. Yet the story was far from over, and the waiter's laughter echoed much further than the walls of that small diner. Overnight, the tale spread like wildfire through the biker community, a story of disrespect, a moment of cruelty, a reminder of how often people judge what they don't understand. And while most would have expected anger or retaliation, something entirely different was set into motion. The bikers' brothers, men and women shaped by long roads, cold nights, and the unspoken code of unity, decided to respond in a way that no one could have predicted, a way that would remind that little town of the power of compassion disguised as strength. By sunrise, the restaurant staff prepared for another dull day, unaware of the storm quietly rolling toward them. The young waiter believed the moment had passed, that his laughter was just another joke among many. But outside those windows, beyond the dusty highway, engines were waking up, dozens upon dozens of them, carried by riders who didn't come for trouble, but came to show that respect is not about appearances, and brotherhood is not something to be mocked. And when morning finally broke, the rumble of engines filled the air like distant thunder. One biker became 10, 10 became 50, and 50 became hundreds. They poured into the parking lot, a sea of chrome and leather, not in anger, but in unity, a reminder that every action carries weight, and sometimes the world teaches its lessons not through raised fists, but through overwhelming presence. As the first group of bikers stepped through the restaurant doors, the room fell into a silence so thick it felt almost physical. Conversation stopped mid-sentence, forks hovered above plates, and eyes widened with a mixture of confusion and fear. Yet the bikers carried no hostility in their expressions. Instead, they wore a calm, steady determination that made their presence even more striking. They moved with unity, taking seats one by one, filling every empty booth, as if reclaiming a space that had previously rejected one of their own. The staff, unsure of how to react, exchanged worried glances, but said nothing. The young waiter from the day before froze behind the counter, realizing instantly why they were there. His throat tightened as he watched the sea of leather jackets settle into the room. He expected yelling, confrontation, maybe even chaos, because that's what he believed bikers represented. But instead, they quietly asked for menus, spoke politely, and treated the place with more respect than he had shown the man he'd mocked. That contradiction cracked something inside him, forcing him to question his assumptions and the careless cruelty he had displayed. Meanwhile, the bikers ordered generously. Plates piled high with breakfast dishes began sliding across the countertop. Orders for dozens of coffees filled the air with a rich aroma, and the kitchen buzzed in a way it hadn't in years. It became clear they hadn't come to scare anyone. They had come to lift up the restaurant, to show that kindness is louder than humiliation. The owner, watching from the doorway of the kitchen, felt a wave of gratitude rise in her chest. She had expected a problem that morning, but instead, she received a blessing disguised as roaring engines. As the bikers ate, the atmosphere slowly began to soften. Other customers who had shrunk into their seats started to relax as laughter and friendly chatter rose from the tables filled with riders. They shared stories of the road, of friendships formed under open skies, and of times they had been misjudged because of their appearance. Their voices carried warmth, resilience, and the kind of truth that only comes from people who have lived through struggle and found strength in one another. The young waiter, still standing in place, watched all of this unfold with a growing ache in his chest. Their kindness made his cruelty feel even sharper. Every smile they offered, every gentle word, every respectful gesture contrasted with the foolish laughter he had thrown at the biker the day before. And as he observed the power of their unity, something inside him began to shift, awakening a sense of remorse he had never felt so deeply before. Eventually, one of the older bikers, a man with silver-streaked hair and eyes that carried the weight of countless miles, stood up and approached the counter. His steps were slow, deliberate, giving the room time to breathe as he moved. When he reached the young waiter, he didn't raise his voice, didn't point a finger, didn't shame him in front of anyone. Instead, he simply asked, in a tone so calm it was almost disarming, whether the boy remembered the man he had mocked the day before. The waiter nodded, unable to speak, his cheeks burning with embarrassment. The older biker leaned in slightly, not to intimidate him, but to ensure his words landed where they needed to. He told the waiter that the man he laughed at had been riding for more than a full day to visit a sick friend in a nearby town, someone he feared might not have much time left. He explained that the dirt on his clothes wasn't from negligence or lack of pride. It was the mark of loyalty, of sacrifice, of a man too focused on being there for someone he loved to worry about looking presentable. With each word, the waiter's eyes grew heavier, the weight of his ignorance sinking deeper into his chest. The restaurant fell silent again as people listened to the truth. The waiter lowered his head, ashamed of how easily he had judged someone whose story he never cared to understand. The older biker didn't scold him. He simply reminded him that every person carries battles invisible to the eye, and that respect costs nothing but can change everything. His voice was firm, but not harsh, the voice of someone who believed in teaching, not punishing. When the biker finished speaking, several of the riders nodded in agreement, their unity reinforcing the message. The young waiter felt the sting of tears forming, but he blinked them back, trying to maintain composure. He whispered an apology, though it sounded painfully small in comparison to the moment. Still, the older biker accepted it with a slight nod, acknowledging the courage it takes to admit fault, especially in front of a room full of strangers. Slowly, the tension in the air dissolved, replaced by an unexpected sense of understanding. The bikers had not come to shame the boy or ruin his day. They had come to show him, and everyone watching, that strength is not measured by how loudly you laugh or how harshly you judge, but by how deeply you understand the stories written in the silence of others. And with that lesson sinking in, the restaurant seemed to breathe differently, as if something heavy had finally lifted. As the morning unfolded, the bikers continued filling every corner of the restaurant with conversation, warmth, and an unexpected sense of community. They were people shaped by long roads and unpredictable weather, by shared struggles and shared victories, and their presence carried a kind of authenticity that could not be imitated. Customers who had initially shrunk under the weight of their arrival now leaned in closer, drawn by the genuine laughter and sincere stories echoing across the room. It felt as if the restaurant had transformed into a gathering place where strangers became witnesses to something rare and deeply human. One family, sitting near the window, found themselves captivated by a young woman biker who spoke about losing her job years earlier and how the community had lifted her back on her feet. She told her story with humility, explaining how one small act of kindness had grown into a lifelong bond. Her words touched the mother at the table, who had silently been struggling with her own challenges, and the simple honesty of the biker's journey reminded her that even in the darkest moments, support can come from places we least expect. In another corner, a group of riders shared their food with two elderly men who had been regulars at the restaurant for decades. The old men listened with fascination as the bikers described sunrises seen from mountaintops and nights spent under open skies. These weren't tales of rebellion or chaos, but stories of connection, freedom, and a deep respect for the road that shaped their lives. The room seemed to vibrate with a quiet sense of inspiration, as if every person present was absorbing something meaningful. The young waiter, still carrying the weight of the previous day, watched as the bikers spread kindness like it was second nature. He couldn't understand how people he had mocked could now be the same people uplifting everyone around them. The contrast was so strong, it left him speechless. He noticed how gently they spoke to the customers, how patiently they waited for their orders, and how generously they tipped the staff. Every action from the bikers reminded him of the responsibility that comes with every single word spoken, especially when directed at someone carrying unseen burdens. By midday, the restaurant's atmosphere felt completely transformed. People who had walked in quietly now stayed longer than planned, drawn in by the energy the bikers had brought. It was as if the entire room had been rewired with gratitude, humility, and mutual respect. And while no one had said it out loud, everyone could feel that something bigger than breakfast was happening, a shift in how they perceived one another, a silent reminder of how easily we forget the value of kindness until someone shows us its true strength. As the dishes continued to arrive, the owner found herself overwhelmed not by the work, but by emotion. She had struggled for months to keep the restaurant afloat. Dwindling customers, rising costs, and long nights spent worrying whether she could keep her doors open for much longer. Seeing the dining room full again, bustling with energy and generosity, felt like a miracle delivered on two wheels. Tears quietly welled in her eyes as she watched the bikers interact with her staff with genuine appreciation. One of the bikers noticed her wiping her eyes discreetly and approached with a soft smile. He asked if she was all right, and she admitted the truth, that she hadn't seen the restaurant this full in more than a year. Her voice trembled as she spoke, but the biker listened with patience and respect. He told her that the community she welcomed every day was larger than she realized, and that people often return kindness long after it has been given, even if she had forgotten the small moments where she had made others feel seen. Moved by the conversation, the biker returned to his table and shared her story with the group. Without hesitation, a quiet agreement spread among them. They decided that their visit would not just be symbolic, it would be meaningful. By the time the checks arrived, every biker tipped generously, some leaving more than the cost of their meals. A few slipped folded bills under their plates, ensuring the owner would only discover them later, long after the noise faded and the day returned to silence. In the midst of collecting plates, the young waiter noticed the scattered notes of gratitude left behind and felt a lump form in his throat. He saw the kindness he had almost thrown away with a single careless laugh, and the realization shook him to his core. He understood now that respect wasn't about who looked polished or who fit society's standards. It was about recognizing the humanity in every person who crossed his path. And for the first time, he felt the urge to be better, not out of guilt, but out of genuine inspiration. By the time noon approached, the bikers began to rise from their seats one by one. The rumble of conversations quieted as jackets were pulled on, helmets clasped and hands extended in farewell. They had come not to intimidate, but to illuminate, not to punish, but to uplift. And as they prepared to leave, the restaurant felt different, fuller, warmer, forever changed by the presence of people who understood that the strongest form of revenge is compassion, amplified through unity. As the bikers stepped outside, the parking lot transformed into a breathtaking sight. Rows upon rows of motorcycles gleamed beneath the late morning sun, their polished chrome catching the light like a field of scattered stars. The sound of engines warming up filled the air with a low, thunderous hum, not aggressive, but powerful in a way that stirred something deep within anyone who heard it. Customers pressed their faces to the windows, mesmerized by the unity and magnitude of the moment. It felt like watching a living river of steel and loyalty preparing to flow back onto the open road. The young waiter hesitated at the restaurant door, torn between fear and the need to make things right. He stepped outside slowly, unsure of whether he even deserved the chance to speak. When the older biker saw him, he didn't turn away. Instead, he waited, allowing the silence to work as a bridge between regret and forgiveness. The boy finally approached, his voice trembling as he apologized once more, not with excuses, not with explanations, but with honesty that came from seeing the consequences of his actions transformed into a lesson he would never forget. The older biker listened patiently, then placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. He told him that growth often comes wrapped in uncomfortable moments, and that the courage to face one's mistakes is far more valuable than pretending they never happened. His words struck the boy deeply, not because they were stern, but because they were generous. They carried the weight of experience, the kind gained only by living through hardship, loss, forgiveness, and the long miles that teach a person who they truly are. Other bikers gathered around them, not to intimidate, but to show that the young waiter wasn't alone. They shared their own stories of being judged, misunderstood, dismissed, or mocked. Tales of pain that turned into strength, and bitterness that turned into resilience. Each story revealed scars shaped by the world, yet none of them spoke with resentment. Instead, they spoke with the quiet confidence of people who had learned that compassion is the only force powerful enough to change hearts without breaking them. By the time the boy stepped back, he felt lighter than he had all morning. He watched as the bikers mounted their motorcycles, one after another, moving with a coordinated grace that mirrored their unity. He realized then that true strength wasn't loud or cruel. It was steady, humble, and deeply rooted in connection. And as the engines roared to life, he silently promised himself that he would carry the lesson of that morning for the rest of his life. When the lead biker finally signaled for the group to roll out, the sound that followed was unlike anything the small town had ever heard. The roar of more than 100 engines blended into a single, powerful wave that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. People stepped outside shops, diners, and offices, drawn to the sight unfolding before them. It wasn't just a spectacle. It was a statement, a reminder that unity, respect, and loyalty create a presence far stronger than anger ever could. As the massive formation pulled onto the road, sunlight glinted off helmets and handlebars like a procession of guardians passing through the town. Drivers paused at intersections, letting the long line of motorcycles glide by uninterrupted. Some waved, others snapped photos, but most simply watched in awe. There was something undeniably moving about seeing so many riders traveling together with purpose, leaving behind not fear, but admiration and a sense of restored humanity. Inside the restaurant, the owner finally let her emotions spill freely. She closed the register, leaned against the counter, and covered her mouth as tears streamed down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of knowing her business had been given a chance to breathe again. She had witnessed the power of a community she never knew she was part of, and in that moment, she felt less alone than she had in years. Gratitude filled her heart, like a quiet sunrise spreading across the horizon. The young waiter watched the last bike disappear down the highway, the rumble of engines fading into the distance. He felt changed in a way he couldn't quite describe, as if a door had opened inside him, revealing a new path he hadn't known existed. He understood now that the world was bigger than his assumptions, and that every person he encountered carried a story worthy of respect. He promised himself he would no longer let ignorance guide his actions, because he had seen firsthand the impact a single moment of cruelty could have, and the extraordinary grace that could rise in response. As the day returned to normal, the town carried with it the quiet echo of something profound. A simple act of disrespect had sparked a chain of events that transformed a community, rebuilt a struggling business, and reshaped the heart of a young man who had much to learn. And though the bikers were gone, their message lingered like a warm wind across the open road. That compassion, unity, and understanding hold the power to turn even the smallest moment into a story worth remembering forever. As the last echo of engines dissolved into the quiet afternoon air, the town was left with more than the memory of an unexpected gathering. It was left with a lesson etched into the hearts of everyone who had witnessed it. The small restaurant that had once felt ordinary now carried the weight of a moment that would be retold for years, a moment when compassion rose higher than pride and unity outshined judgment. The young waiter, standing in the doorway with a new sense of humility, realized that a single careless choice had opened the door to a transformation greater than anything he could have imagined. In the owner's eyes, the day became a vivid reminder that hope sometimes arrives dressed in the most unexpected forms. Where she once feared losing her livelihood, she now saw the power of community, restoring what she believed was slipping away. The kindness of strangers had breathed life back in her business, but it had also reminded her that resilience grows strongest when fueled by connection. She felt lighter, steadier, knowing that the world still held people willing to give without expecting anything in return. For the townspeople who observed the events unfold, the experience became a gentle challenge to reconsider their own assumptions. They had seen a group, often misunderstood, reveal themselves not as symbols of intimidation, but as carriers of loyalty, grace, and extraordinary humanity. The contrast between appearance and truth lingered in their minds, urging them to look beyond first impressions and search for the stories hidden beneath the surface of every encounter. In that realization, the town found a quiet sense of unity it hadn't felt in years. And as time passed, the story took root in the community's memory, a reminder that strength is not defined by noise or power, but by how far compassion can ripple when it is offered, even to those who haven't earned it yet. The young waiter grew from the experience, carrying with him the understanding that every person carries invisible battles and unspoken stories. And the bikers, though long gone, left behind a legacy of humility and solidarity that transformed a moment of mockery into a powerful testament of human connection. If this story touched you, inspired you, or made you reflect on the kind of world we're all shaping together, take a moment to support this journey. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice helps keep stories like this alive, reminding others of the quiet strength found in empathy, respect, and the unexpected heroes who ride through life teaching us what truly matters.